Measure 5.5 inches up from the top of the RWAL support and center the bottom of a steel hand grip there against the back wall panel. Pre-drill through the 2 holes in the steel hand grip, then attach it using wafer lags. Repeat to install a second steel hand grip at the same height on the other side of the opening. With the inside of the door panel facing up, measure 15 inches up from the bottom. Position the bottom edge of the catch plate there and fasten it with 2 wood screws. Now measure 22 inches up from the bottom and position the bottom edge of the door handle there. Secure it with 2 pan screws. Flip the door panel over and position a second door handle directly opposite the first. Fasten it in place with 2 pan screws. At the other side of the door, place 2 hinges, one close to the top and the other near the bottom. Once the hinge stops are in place tight to the door window panel, fasten each of the hinges with 3 pan screws. With some help, move the door window panel into place. Using a tape measure, position the bottom so that there's 3/4 of an inch space underneath. There should also be 5/8 of an inch space on the hinge side. Attach the door window panel using 3 pan screws per hinge. Place the magnetic catch in the notched end of the door stop and, using a handheld screwdriver, attach it using 2 wood screws. Don't over-tighten. Now attach the door stop to the narrow front panel inside the assembly using 3 pan screws. When you're done, the door stop should overhang the door side panel by 1¼ inches and be aligned to connect with the catch plate. Place the table support on the table top. Make sure the ends are flush. Then attach with 4 pan screws. Now, center the tabletop assembly into the opening of the front wall panel so that the notched ends fit. Attach the assembly with 2 wood screws through the holes at the front of the table support. From inside the assembly, position a flat bracket over the edge of the tabletop and a slat in the front wall panel. Attach it with 3 truss screws. Repeat to install a second flat bracket over the other slat. From outside the fort, measure 3¼ inches up from the bottom of the center board and the narrow front panel. Attach gable clock assembly with 4 1-inch pan screws. It's important to make sure that the top screw connects to the block at the back of the panel. Lay the engineered SW beam on the ground and attach 6 heavy-duty swing hangers with 2 hex bolts each. Make sure you use the plastic form washer and other hardware as listed in your instruction manual before tightening each bolt. When you're done, attach a spring-loaded quick link to each heavy-duty swing hanger. Next, insert a T-nut into the center hole on one side of the engineered SW beam. Insert a wafer bolt through the other side and tighten. It's important to install this bolt to minimize the checking of the wood. Flip the beam over again and place the Cedar Summit plaque so that it's centered over the T-nut. Attach the plaque with 4 wood screws. Attach 2 heavy flat brackets to the fort end of the engineered SW beam using 2 hex bolts and the appropriate hardware. Now position the SW mount between the heavy flat brackets. While holding it in position, use hex bolts to attach the SW mount to the heavy flat brackets. Then tighten the bolts. Place a heavy L bracket on the swing beam and connect it with 1 hex bolt to the engineered SW beam only. Place the block SW on the ground, the side with the larger holes facing down. Position the SW block angle over top, making sure the angled ends face up. Position 2 heavy L brackets on top and insert 2 6-inch hex bolts. Roll the assembly on its side and attach the bolts loosely with the hardware provided. Hammer 3 T-nuts into the holes on each SW post. Insert wafer bolts on the opposite side and tighten. It's important to do this to minimize the checking of the wood. Next, thread a heavy C-bracket onto a 9¼ inch hex bolt before pushing the bolt through 1 SW post, the block SW, and a second SW post. Attach it with the lock nut and the appropriate hardware. With some assistance, maneuver the swing end of the engineered SW beam between the two heavy L brackets on the swing post assembly. Attach the two assemblies together with a 4-inch hex bolt through both heavy L brackets and the beam. Then insert a 6-inch hex bolt through a hole on the heavy C bracket to connect it to the engineered SW beam. With some help, lift the fort end of the swing post assembly into position at the top of the SW wall panel. When the SW mount is in position, insert a T-nut in the bottom hole from inside the assembly, then insert the hex bolt from the outside. Next, insert the bolt in the top hole from inside the assembly. Then tighten the bolts. Adjust the positioning of the SW post until you're sure the engineered SW beam is level. Then, move the cross support into position, with one end on the inside of an SW post and the other on the outside. When it's level, pre-drill. Then attach the cross support to each of the SW posts with lag screws. Tighten once you're sure the cross support is level. Hammer a T-nut into the hole on one side of the cross support. Insert a wafer bolt into the other side and tighten. This is an important step to minimize wood checking. Tighten all of the bolts connecting the engineered SW beam, the block assembly, and the SW posts. Next, drill pilot holes into the block assembly through the holes near the top of each SW post. Install lag screws and make sure they're tightly in place. Now, pre-drill a hole into the bottom of an engineered SW beam through the remaining hole in the heavy C bracket. Insert a lag screw there too. Drive rebar ground stakes 13 inches into the ground in 5 places outlined in your instruction manual. Be careful not to damage or break the washers while you're hammering. Once all of the ground stakes are secure, check each one carefully and if necessary, file down any sharp edges or touch up with outdoor paint. Place the Crowsnest gusset and Crowsnest joist together so that the bottoms and ends are flush. Attach with one pan screw. Create a second set, this time with the Crowsnest joist on the opposite side from the first. Position the Crowsnest back so that one side is flush to the ends of the joists on the two Crowsnest gusset and joist assemblies. Make sure each joist is centered over the holes on the Crowsnest back, then attach with 2 wood screws. Repeat to attach the second Crowsnest gusset and joist assembly.